This series is hosted by the Washington State University Extension Energy Program. The WSU Energy Program is a self-supported department within the university. We receive project funding from federal government agencies, federal power marketing agencies, the nonprofit Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, and several other sources. The Energy Program has a staff of 60 people working at our downtown Olympia office, in Spokane, and at other satellite locations. Our customers range from industrial plant managers to private consultants, commercial businesses, government agencies, and utilities. The webinar today is sponsored by the Western Washington Clean Cities Coalition, which was founded in 1998. The Coalition is a not-for-profit membership organization dedicated to expanding the use and availability of alternative fuels and advanced vehicle technologies in the Pacific Northwest. The Coalition provides education, technical expertise, networking opportunities, and funding assistance to public and private partners to forge a region less dependent on imported oil and oriented more around sustainable transportation choices. The Coalition is one of nearly 100 coalitions in the U.S. Department of Energy Clean Cities program, collectively advancing the energy, economic, and environmental security of the United States by supporting community-based efforts to reduce the use of petroleum in the transportation sector. This particular work on biomethane as a transportation fuel has been supported by a grant that the Coalition won in 2009. It's a $15 million grant. They received one of the largest grant awards in the country from the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. Projects funded through this grant will put more than 400 alternative fuel and advanced technology vehicles on the road and build new fueling stations and several hundred electric charging stations around Washington State. We're really excited about the program today. We've got some tremendous experts online to talk with you about the technologies involved in making biomethane for transportation fuel and many of the incentives and policies that are being used to advance this method. Our experts today come from two of the nation's leading national laboratories. They're going to work together on this presentation. Leading off is Marianne Mintz. Marianne specializes in transportation energy forecasting and policy analysis for Argonne National Laboratory's Center for Transportation Research. She has over 30 years experience in transportation and energy analysis and has authored over 100 publications in her field. Her current work centers on infrastructure requirements of alternative fuel pathways, economic impacts of fuel cells and natural gas vehicles, fuel transitions, and energy and greenhouse gas emissions of renewable natural gas, that's biomethane, from landfills and anaerobic digesters. She's the emeritus member of the Transportation Research Board, past chair of the board's Transportation Energy Committee, and a current member of the Special Task Force on Transportation and Climate Change. She holds a master's degree from UCLA and has completed postgraduate work at the University of Illinois at Chicago. She'll be joined by James Wegerson. Dr. Wegerson began work as an associate scientist in the Department of Applied Science at Brookhaven National Laboratory in 1980. For the past 20 years, he served as a senior technical advisor to the Department of Energy's Vehicle Technologies Program Office. His current responsibility is in the use of biogas as an alternative transportation fuel for reducing our country's dependence on imported petroleum. Dr. Wegerson received his PhD in 1977 in applied physics from the University of Missouri, Rolla. Upon graduation, he joined the electrical and environmental engineering staff as an assistant professor at the State University of New York, Buffalo. We're really excited about the program today. Just a couple of quick notes to the attendees online. We're planning to post video of this webinar to the Western Washington Clean Cities and the WSU Extension Energy Program websites so that anyone can review it and others who are unable to attend may look at it later. For anyone who's new to the GoToWebinar system, take a quick look at the control panel. We invite you to type your questions in the available questions box and send them to the organizer. We'll address these as fully as possible during the period for questions after the presentations. And of course, after the webinar, we'll do our best to provide answers to all your questions, including those we may not have time to address today. We'll get out answers via email, so expect an email from us later. Right now, I'd like to shift this over to Marianne, and she can take over with the start of her presentation. Thank you all very much.
Okay, good morning or afternoon, as the case may be. I'm not sure you got screen showing, Jim?
No, not yet. I still have the Western Clean Cities.
Okay, I must have done something wrong. Let me go back. How about now?
Yes.
Okay. That other voice was Jim Wegerson. As I said a moment ago, good morning or afternoon. This is Marianne Mintz. I am going to control the presentation for both Jim and myself, and I'll start, and then Jim will come in after a bit, and then one of us will finish up. I'm not quite sure how it's going to work, but we'll see how as we go.
We'll both finish.
Okay, good. Okay. No, I'm not. Okay, good. The presentation is organized into briefly, I'll talk a little bit about natural gas and why renewable natural gas makes so much sense. Then we'll discuss some of the issues in renewable natural gas project development, which can also be said as why not RNG? Why isn't it happening? And then we'll finish up with some conclusions. In terms of the overview, as many of you know, and I guess I should preface this with the fact that I'm sure that there's a range of knowledge and expertise among the audience today, so I hope I don't bore you. The U.S. is awash in natural gas. Production has been growing in the last decade. As you see by the statistics on this slide, 17% a year, 48% a year, yeah, huge increases. We've basically stopped importing much of our natural gas, and we're producing most of it now domestically. And production is expected to triple out to 2035, according to the latest Energy Information Administration forecast.
Welcome to GoToWebinar, Web Events Made Easy.
Acronym, if you will, for hydraulic fracturing, the way shale gas is extracted from the earth. And then even beyond that, there are issues associated with the EPA's estimates of how much methane is emitted in the process of producing natural gas. And just want to show one more thing. So basically, by the year 2035, the U.S. is expected to get almost half of our natural gas from shale gas. And this little graphic that I just popped up shows where it's been coming from, this huge increase in the last decade. You can see a lot of it has come from the Barnett Shale, which is in Texas, an awful lot also from Fayetteville, and also from the Marcellus Shale, which is the area that gets a lot of publicity in the Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York area. This is another way of looking at the resource. It shows the Barnett Shale is highlighted in green. That's in the Dallas area, where much of the production has been occurring of late. But actually, most states have natural gas resources. Not all of them are shale, but there's an awful lot of natural gas spread around the country. And as I said, the reserves and the production forecasts have increased enormously. The ratio between the amount of reserves and how much is actually produced in a given year has risen from, it used to be about 10 years all the time, 10 years of resources compared to what we're actually producing. Now we have over 100 years of resource available. But of the 22 shale basins in the U.S., only 7 of them are currently producing, and so there will be a lot more production in the years ahead. With all this rising supply, natural gas prices have become decoupled from oil. Back in the 90s and 80s and before that, the price of natural gas and the price of oil kind of followed in lockstep, one with the other. But since around 2005 or so, the price of natural gas has dropped, and it's expected to stay that way. That's the green line in this graph, and this is another one of the Department of Energy's forecasts from the Energy Information Administration. And that contrasts with the price of petroleum, motor gasoline, and diesel fuel, which are expected to rise as crude oil prices rise. So as a result, there's a large differential between the pump price of CNG and the price of gasoline or diesel fuel. And it's now on the order of $1.50 to $2 a gallon cheaper to refuel with natural gas than with gasoline or diesel, and that's created a tremendous incentive to convert fleets and to use more of the natural gas in transportation. So if fossil natural gas is cheap and it's accessible, why are we talking about renewable gas? Why do we need renewable gas? Most of these discussions revolve around energy, economy, or environment. Both renewable gas and fossil natural gas are both domestic resources. They have a domestic supply chain. Price stability is likely to be achievable with both. They both would increase U.S. investments and earnings and improve our balance of trade and improve the number of jobs that might be created, although there might be some regional differences. And both would improve energy security. So why renewable gas? And the answer is basically because renewable gas has a tremendous environmental benefit. It's a renewable resource. It also benefits from the fact that it's a low-carbon fuel, permits reduced greenhouse gas emissions, and as a result, it's a sustainable fuel. And the GREET model is one way that we look at how renewable gas might or is better from an environmental standpoint than fossil gas. And I'm going to talk primarily about greenhouse gases, although there are some benefits as far as criteria pollutants as well. The GREET model is a model that was developed here at Argonne. It stands for Greenhouse Gases, Regulated Emissions, and Energy Use in Transportation. It looks at the 3 major greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. And it converts those into equivalent CO2 emissions using global warming potentials of each of those 3 gases. It also looks at criteria pollutants, and then it permits us to look at emissions separated out by fossil and non-fossil sources, total and urban, and for each additional type of fuel. The model is documented and is available at this website. And at present, there are more than 15,000 registered users worldwide. It's free. You can download it. You just have to register. The latest version of the model was released in October, and that includes the anaerobic digester pathway, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, as well as a landfill gas pathway. And we've changed the way we describe the GREET model. We now the new numbering system is GREET 1. Because it was released in 2011, it's GREET 1 2011, and that's the current model. Now, in the GREET model, it tracks carbon in let me hide this. Tracks carbon in what we call well-to-pump, pump-to-wheel, and well-to-wheel pathways. The well-to-pump is the pathway from the ground to the fuel dispenser. The pump-to-wheel is from the fuel dispenser onto the vehicle, and as the vehicle is operated, and the entire pathway is called well-to-wheel. Sometimes when we talk about renewable gas, we talk about waste-to-wheel, but it's basically the same idea. In this graphic, you see a generic petroleum pathway, a generic fossil natural gas pathway, and a generic landfill gas pathway. The fossil pathways are basically the same thing. They involve extraction from the ground, processing, T&D stands for transportation and distribution, to a refueling site, and then use on board a vehicle. On a landfill gas pathway, it's a little more complicated. This section here is what we call the reference case, in that some of the carbon remains in the ground, some of it, in the reference case, would be emitted to the air, some would be flared. But if you convert the landfill gas into vehicle fuel, it would go through this pathway, which looks very much like the fossil pathway: fuel production, transportation, and distribution, and then use on board a vehicle. Somehow I'm not. There we go. Now this is a bit more detailed representation of an anaerobic digester pathway. The top portion shows a reference case, which is a bit more complicated because it has the residue being applied to the soil, but it's more the way it's displayed in this graphic than anything else. It's still relatively simple, but it does involve a difference between how the manure is managed, which could vary from location to location. The bottom portion is the fuel conversion case, and it also has this additional step, which is the anaerobic digester residue, how that is applied to the soil, and therefore some carbon is again sequestered in the soil, and that might displace some synthetic fertilizers. And all of that is included in the GREET model. And I know this looks complicated, but I'm actually calling it a generic anaerobic digester pathway because there are additional variations depending upon the type of digester that's used, the type of manure management system in the reference case, the type of power generation that's used, the type of cleanup technology that's used. So this, even though it looks complicated, is actually a generic anaerobic digestion pathway. And Jim will be talking a bit more about some of the details, like the digesters and the cleanup technologies. Just want to make one comment that the anaerobic digestion pathway does not consider production of electricity as a co-product in the default case. It can be modeled, but that is not in the default. Okay, now these are the actual landfill gas to renewable gas pathways. For the landfill gas case, there are 10 specific pathways. For anaerobic digestion, there are more than that. As I said, it's more complicated. I'm not going to go into each of these, but this just shows you some of the detail that's in the model and that is used to compute the greenhouse gas emissions of renewable gas using various assumptions as compared to the natural gas or petroleum that it might replace. And some of the details here include some of the efficiencies and whether or not the gas is trucked off-site or whether the refueling is conducted on-site, and whether you're talking about compression of a gaseous product or liquefaction to an LNG product. Here are some more of the parameters that are in the GREET model in the default case. Again, I'm not going to go into much of this, but this is for your information to go back to afterwards if you want to start playing with the GREET model. This gives you a little bit of the detail that's in there. When we talk about animal waste transportation in GREET, we're talking about trucking, and we assume 3 miles, certain moisture content. We assume that it was all flared in the reference case. We assume the efficiencies of the digester, and as I said, Jim will go into that a bit more. It varies with the digester technology, also with some of the climate issues and what type of manure. I didn't mention that in the GREET model, we can model 2 different types of manure, both we can do dairy and we can also do swine. We have assumptions in there about what happens to the digester residue, some of the processing and upgrading efficiencies, and some of the assumptions for the vehicle technologies that are displaced. So if it's a light-duty vehicle, we assume a standard gasoline vehicle of 23 or so miles per gallon gasoline equivalent. We assume the natural gas vehicle has achieved the same fuel economy, whereas with a heavy-duty truck, we assume a 6 mile per gallon vehicle, which would be a standard tractor trailer, and we assume that the vehicle that operates on natural gas gets 90% of that. There's somewhat of a degradation because the energy content of the fuel is a bit less. Now, in terms of the results, if you look on this graph, sometimes I use the term CRNG and LRNG. Basically, it's just compressed natural gas or compressed renewable natural gas. We're talking about essentially the same thing, whether it comes from a renewable source or a fossil source. That's why the titles here are without the renewable, because we're comparing it with conventional fossil natural gas. Over here on the left, I talk about the compressed renewable natural gas. Fossil fuel use is lowest. With covered lagoons, a little bit lower, because they have lower process energy inputs. But I should also mention here that the blue bars, those correspond to the well to pump, which is the emissions or the consumption of the portion of the pathway from the extraction of the fuel through the processing back to its being put onto a vehicle. The portions that correspond to pump to wheel, the red portions, they will be very similar because we're talking about whether it gets a 10% reduction or no reduction, and whether we're talking about diesel versus gasoline or gasoline. I should mention on these greenhouse gas emissions, we have negative numbers for well to pump because we're talking about a renewable fuel. So those negative emissions offset much of the positive emissions on the pump to wheel side, which is vehicle operation. So the net effect are these gray bars in the middle, which, as you see, the covered lagoon is a little bit less than the complete mixed plug flow or mixed plug flow digesters. And as I said earlier, Jim will be talking more about those particular technologies. As compared with the fossil alternatives, which are quite a bit higher because they don't have that offsetting factor. The blue bars for fossil natural gas or gasoline correspond to the greenhouse gas emissions of producing the fossil gas, transporting it, cleaning it up, and basically getting it onto the vehicle. So they're positive, and as a result, the total emissions, the gray bar is the sum of the two, the red and the blue. When we're talking about these bars over here, whereas the other ones, they're offsetting. Last point, the differences among the technologies are much smaller than between fossil natural gas and renewable natural gas. You see there are differences in the both on the fossil fuel use and on the greenhouse gas emissions, but they're much less than the difference between the renewable gas and the fossil gas. So basically, whichever technology is chosen for a specific project is going to achieve a major reduction in greenhouse gases. There will be specifics that may make one technology be better for one application than another, but no matter which technology is used, greenhouse gas reductions will be achieved. Now, this graph shows the renewable gas pathways. I've grouped 4 of them on the top, and this is a spark-ignited engine using liquid renewable natural gas via anaerobic digestion. This is a spark ignition engine using liquid renewable natural gas from landfill gas. You can see they're very similar. You get a little bit less greenhouse gas emissions for the AD case, but not For the landfill gas case with same, well, it's the other way around on this one. For the compressed gas cases. And then these are all grams of CO2 equivalent per megajoule. So this is grams of greenhouse gas emissions per quantity of fuel consumed. So it takes out the, it's well to wheel, but it takes out the difference between whether you're looking at a light-duty vehicle or a heavy-duty vehicle and what its efficiency is. It's basically for a unit of fuel how many grams of CO2 are emitted. And you see a huge reduction for the renewable gas pathways as compared with the fossil gas pathways. Those are the gray ones. And these are, we're showing RFG, which is reformulated gasoline in a spark-ignited engine. This is your standard gasoline on the bottom. Then we show a gasoline E85 mixture, 85% ethanol, 15% gasoline. And you see a nice reduction there. And then going up, the compression ignition engine with a low sulfur diesel, a compression ignition engine using a 20% blend of biodiesel and 80% conventional diesel, low sulfur diesel. Spark ignited engine using CNG, which is produced in North America. That's what the NA stands for. Or using LNG, sourced in North America. And then as you move up, you get the 20% blend. And here, 20% blend of digester gas in CNG or LNG. And you can see that as compared to, it's not as good as a straight renewable gas, but it is better than all of the other alternatives that we're showing on this graph. And given the fact that it's not clear how much renewable gas can be produced, and in fact it's likely that 20% would be a pretty attractive number. This might be a really really attractive scenario to pursue. Then as far as the notes on the side, as I said, we're talking about a 30% reduction relative to low sulfur diesel for a 20% blend of digester gas in LNG or CNG, and that's about a 15% reduction as compared to diesel. So if RNG or biomethane has all of these significant greenhouse gas benefits, the question is why isn't it being adopted in a much bigger way? And I'm going to start talking about that, and then Jim will chime in and he'll talk for a bit as well.
Yeah, Mary Ann, or organizers, I think it would be good if we did change over for me control so I could use the cursor.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's. I realize I'm using it a lot.
Yeah, and I see it really helps the presentation if the speaker has control of the cursor.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that'll take a little bit of time then. Okay, let me start on this slide. Basically, right now we're looking at. I won't really go into the pie, which is what this first bullet corresponds to. But the fact that part of the problem is that there's so much competition for the resource. There are many programs that incentivize electric power over renewable gas. And each state has, almost every state has a renewable portfolio standard. I believe there are, well, about 30 states have them. In California, they also have a self-generation incentive program, which incentivizes the use for electric power. There's less incentive for the owners of the natural gas grid or the local distribution company to accept renewables. In many cases, the tariff does not make it attractive. They require additional gas composition analyses and all kinds of other restrictions, and there is no feed-in tariff that would require it, like there is on the electric side. In California, you also have low carbon fuel standards that they that might help offset some of this, but there's increased desire to apply them primarily to in-state sources, and there's although many out-of-state sources have applied for those credits, they're being viewed somewhat less attractively by the state. There are also some incentives that have uncertain futures, like the Section 1603 tax credit, which is due to expire at the end of this year. It's not clear about how long the Rural Energy for America's program, REAP, which is operated by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, how long that will be in effect. And so they face all kinds of uncertainties. And let me try now to, oops.
Marianne, this is Jim at WSU. While you're switching over to Jim Wergerson, we have a question from the audience that, Jim, I'm hoping you might be able to address in the slides to come regarding why manufacturers aren't making more CNG vehicles. Once you have this wonderful fuel, biomethane, there's this kind of chicken and egg dilemma about the market having enough fuel available to get more vehicles and having the vehicles available to get the fuel. So I'm hoping maybe you can address that.
We'll talk about that. There's a slide in the later part of the slide talking about that, but the answer is they are now making more vehicles. The vehicle selections have grown substantially in the last couple of years.
They have. Jim, I think you might have the control now. Although
I don't have any picture. It still shows you, Marianne, but
it does. I think he has to be made the presenter.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Panelist. I don't have any.
I'm still showing as the presenter.
Yeah, you still got the little blue with the arrow in there. There goes something. All right. Show
Okay,
my
I'm no
screen.
longer the presenter.
All right. Should I hit play button?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. And download's complete. How do I get the slides? Or is it loading?
I'm there. Bring up your PowerPoint, Jim.
All right. Well, Marianne has that. It's the same one.
Unless you want me to just try to use the cursor for you.
All right. We might have to do that. Because she has the PowerPoint. I guess we messed this thing up here.
Well, you have the same PowerPoint. You can just use yours.
All right. Well, they're slightly. All right. Do I have to bring up the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
All right. I'm trying to get there.
WWU webinar? Yeah.
Yeah, I got it. Is it on there now?
Yep.
All right, I just need to go down to the where we are.
Right. We're at.
All right. And do I have control? Is
Yes.
the cursor going?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just make it full screen there, Jim.
All right. Where is my full screen? Enlarge it or?
Top, right?
Well, that minimum.
Oh, you got to minimize the size thing. Can you do the orange arrow?
Push F5.
F5?
5.
Yes.
All right. That's the easy way. All right. Catching up here. All right. I think we're set now.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And well, thank you, Marianne. Let me carry on here, and I'll start with this power chart here. And if people would like to, and I've already added up all the contributions, it turns out to be about 4.7 trillion cubic feet. And most of you know a trillion cubic feet is the same energy content as a quad. And so that's a lot of energy. A quad is 10 to the 15th BTUs. The United States annually uses 100 quad, 25 quad in natural gas. So there is a tremendous potential for renewable natural gas. In saying that, though, I have to also be honest, this is a combination of anaerobic digestion and thermal gasification. And the majority of this is thermal gasification, and the majority, this dark green here, is wood. And so that the economics of that is not as good as the economics of renewable natural gas. And so the intent of this slide, which was put together by Karen Hanberg of Westport Innovations, is to get the attention of the federal programs that indeed there is significant amount of renewable natural gas out there. From our point of view, that's kind of a top-down scenario. Get the Washington crowd interested in supporting renewable natural gas, but we're a little more interested in the bottom-up that Clean Cities represents. Let's get a few good programs and show that they indeed work and grow from the bottom up. And I think there is a bigger potential in doing the bottoms up scenario than necessarily waiting for Washington to solve our problems. And so with that, let's look at the next slide, slide 17, which is, again, came from Karen, which shows the differences between the cost differences between compressed natural gas, gasoline, and liquid natural gas in diesel. I'm not going to go through all these slides and just point out a few highlights of the first of which is for raw material costs. Obviously, for gasoline and diesel, raw material is the major cost. If you looked at the raw material for renewable natural gas in the green area, you can't even see it, and potentially it's negative if you include tipping fees. So the cost really associated with renewable natural gas is in the production and cleanup of natural gas, and that's the what we'll talk about in this webinar. Again, the costs are about the same. We'll see this come up again and again. Cost of natural gas at NYMEX typically are projected to be $4 a million BTU, whereas renewable, in this slide it has renewable natural gas at $8, and we can see some data out there which shows that renewable natural gas could be from $5 to $9 a million BTU. And just for a point of reference, thermal gasification usually is $10 a million BTU and up. And so that's why our interest, at least initially, is in renewable natural gas and not into thermal gasification techniques. Oops. And so basically what we have down at the bottom is that the tipping fee from renewable natural gas, should be somehow less than the $4 a million BTU range if indeed we want to make a business case out of renewable natural gas. All right. The following slide is really the cost related to facility size. And this data really came from Patrick Chen, who worked at CalSTART. He did it in 2010, economic assessment of biogas and biomethane production from manure, and I've taken the data from that white paper. And the important thing here is, again, you can see on facility size from small, which is 100,000 cubic feet a day, up to 1 million cubic feet a day, the differences. And looking at the total cost in dollars per million BTU, you can see that the price obviously drops as you go to larger sizes. We refer to that as economy of scale, or sometimes bigger is better. You'll see that come up a little later. But the majority of the cost is really associated with the upgrade, which is the cleanup cost. If one looked closely in this report, would find that the anaerobic digesters, they consider 4 different types. Obviously, there's a range in the cost of those, but that cost was not the major contributor to the total cost. It was really a cleanup cost. And so, and what are we talking about as far as cleanup costs? This is from manure, so really we were looking at the cost to remove the hydrogen sulfide, get the CO2 down to less than 4%, and water removal, so that the biogas could be essentially upgraded to a biomethane fuel. There are various types of anaerobic digesters. Mary Ann had a list of them, and any paper you read will kind of have maybe a different terminologies for the various same digesters. I'm going to go through this rather quickly. If one wants to know more about anaerobic digesters, I would recommend just going to Wikipedia on anaerobic digesters, and it's a nice, clear discussion of what anaerobic digestion consists of. What I did lift from the web is this picture of a complete mixed digester, and the reason I did that was, one, to actually show the footprint or scale. You see the man up here, and basically that's the kind of the scale of the system. And so they're not small. And other important features is to get good conversion, methane conversion factors, as Mary Ann talked. You really need to have temperature control. You see the insulation here. And so if I were to go back, and let me go back and just discuss the various types of digesters. You have a covered lagoon. Those are used obviously in farms where you have plenty of space. Obviously they're the simplest. Where's my cursor? Here they're simplest and the least expensive. However, since you don't have temperature control, they're also the slowest. And so as far as digesting the material, so if you have a lot of extra space on your farm, you can certainly go with covered lagoons, and the cleanup is also fairly straightforward. Plug flow is the next simplest, which is basically a building, airtight building that you move in your organic materials and kind of push it through as it digests. And again, it's very simple and cheap. Most systems now use kind of this diagram I have off to the right, and this would be considered a medium-sized facility, and the larger facilities, they would be modular, would simply be multiple tanks. Not to confuse with number 4 here, which I use the term multiple tanks. I don't know if it's the best term I should use. Maybe 2-temperature tank would be a better term to use these, and basically they use different types of bacteria or microbial. You have the low temperature, which is what one normally sees in landfills, the bacteria that operate at essentially room temperature, slightly above room temperature. And then they have another strain, which they really recovered, I think, from the hot springs and thermal gases that act at that live and thrive at the higher temperature. And the higher temperatures, their appetites are greater, and so they're consume the material much faster, and so actually the throughput is called hydraulic resonance time. How long the liquid stays in this reactor controls then how much gas, your conversion factor, and how much gas you have out of there. And so obviously hungrier bugs are preferable, but it does complicate the design operation of the reactor when you use 2-temperature system. And to my knowledge, most systems coming out now are the, except for our farms, of course, are the complete mix type of system. Obviously, if you grind up your material, it reacts faster, and the mix it also. Then having mixing down here also speeds up the conversion to methane. As far as the slide is biogas upgrading, there I've listed kind of 5 cleanup techniques that are available. The first 3, water washing, pressure swing absorption, and membrane, are available commercially. So you can find companies or manufacturers that will supply you on skid-mounted units these types of materials. The non-aqueous solvents, which is basically a washing technique where you don't use water, it's sometimes commercially called siloxane. I mean, not siloxane, it's Lexol. Siloxane is the silicon material you need to get removed of. But it can be methanol, or this is a glycol mix, something that has a CO2 solubility in it. And basically it is simply a wash technique. You can also remove CO2 by reacting it with amines or potassium carbonate. That has a high selectivity for CO2. The amines react readily with CO2. However, the problem is the fact that they do bind readily with CO2. You need a lot of heat to disassociate or break those bonds, and so there is penalties when you use these systems as far as heat. Regenerative heat is needed, and you don't want to get your regenerative heat by burning your methane, because down here at the bottom you would like to be able to consume only 3 to 6% of your methane energy content in these cleanup systems. And so let me talk a little bit about the advantages of water washing. Obviously, it's cost effective. It could be used for smaller facilities, and there's no chemicals involved. However, as we're increasingly learning, water is a precious commodity, and so you certainly can't use a once-through system. You're going to have to regenerate the water, and since CO2 is not that soluble in water, there'll be a high power consumption, high power pumping consumption of energy, and of course you'll have to dry your system out. You need a desk dryer system. The pressure swing absorption, again, some regenerative heat, and hydrogen sulfide is a poison for the system. However, since it is a molecular sieve, you can tailor it exactly for your methane molecule and then exclude a lot of the other gas molecules, CO2, nitrogen, and oxygen, which is a plus up. There is a low power requirement there. Mainly it's valve switching, but when there is some maintenance problems of always switching the valves and keeping the valves functional. Membranes have been gaining popularity mainly because they're low to little maintenance, and again, no chemicals. They're, especially in the United States. The disadvantages are they are expensive, and you need a maybe 200 psi pressure system to move to operate the membrane system. So basically, Europe in the past has favored the water washing or pressure swing absorption as far as a cleanup system. As I mentioned, in the United States, membrane technology is gaining popularity. One, in looking at a cleanup system, should say, well, I really only want to use 3 to 6% of my energy content of methane to clean up the system, and also have only 2% atmospheric release of methane in dealing with the system. And so, although I encourage people to write in questions, and I guess we've had one already, and if we don't have time to answer them, we certainly will answer them after the webinar. I took this opportunity at least to ask myself a couple questions that might come up. And the first question is there any value, or what's the value in really taking bio-waste and putting it into an anaerobic digester? And of course the value is you're taking a waste material and turning it into some valued product. Well, what type of valued product? Well, of course, the first plus is the biogas. You do get the biogas as we just discussed, and of course, biogas can either be used for combined heat and power applications, are a vehicle fuel. In this particular instance, we're looking or exploring the opportunities for a vehicle fuel because you can get 3 to 4 times the cost or payment if it is used as a displacement of diesel or gasoline versus power. And so again, on the revenue or business case, if you can get it into a vehicle, sell it to market it as a vehicle fuel, you'll get a bigger return for your dollar. However, you don't want to make the mistake of saying, well, okay, my whole business case is to try to get it into a vehicle fuel. There are other opportunities as far as to make a business case. As Mary Ann previously showed, there are residues coming out of an anaerobic digester. The liquid residue can be sold as a fertilizer. But again, one has to be somewhat careful about this. One, I don't think, and I'm not an expert on this, would want to take the liquid effluent from a digester and necessarily spray it over my spinach or lettuce fields. However, certainly golf courses and other applications, you could apply the liquid or sell the liquid from an anaerobic digester as a liquid fertilizer. Also, the solids can be used as a soil supplement. There are a lot of minerals that remain in the solid and carbon, and so that it does supplement soil also. However, I think the biggest revenue stream that could go into an anaerobic digester, and I kind of refer to this as low-hanging fruit, is the cost avoidance of the tipping fees. Now, I don't know about the West Coast, but here on the East Coast where I live, it's $80 a ton. And so if you're willing to accept some organic garbage per ton, they'll pay you $80. And, of course, some of this tonnage goes up to 100 tons a day available, and so 100 times 80 is you're beginning to get a significant revenue stream in to offset or to add to the other type of revenues one could get. So obviously, besides the environmental low carbon footprint that Mary Ann referred to as renewable natural gas, I think it's an exciting time to look at that there actually, from bottom up, could be business cases for doing anaerobic digestion. As I mentioned earlier, bigger is better, economy of scale. If I only have so much organic waste, should I acquire additional organic waste from someone other stream to make my systems bigger? And basically, when we do a mixed waste stream, we call that co-digestion or co-digester. And so what's the questions or problems associated with co-digestion? Well, first and foremost, as I say down here, before you make more product, you need a market for that product. And if it is indeed the transportation sector, you got to make sure that the vehicles are available, which again complicates the system a little bit. And so this is not a kind of a field of dreams where build it and they shall come. In this particular case, you have to build it and also make sure that the vehicles are out there ready to use your product. And that kind of leads into the one question: how come there's not additional vehicles out there which will that I could sell my product to? And the second bullet here is co-digesters. They add complication and risk. You want to optimize the outputs or optimize the throughput, minimize the residence time that they're in there, and so you really have to understand the biological activity. I'm not a biologist. I can't help you out there. However, visiting Ohio and New York, where I'm at, and also Wisconsin, I know the agricultural departments at the various universities are very strong in looking at having digesters and testing their performance for various types of waste. So it's an interesting field, and that's growing now faster than one can really track. However, you do have a problem when you get bigger. It's siting and permitting issues. It's the old NIMBY, not in my backyard. Again, if you're a farmer and you have cattle or dairy farm, you don't necessarily have that problem. But as you move closer and closer into the cities where perhaps the vehicles are, you're going to also potentially have siting and permitting issues. And if there's one cost that's constantly overlooked, it's the siting and permitting issues. All right, so I've kind of quickly went over this because, again, that time allowed. But if one is interested in trying to get more information, obviously the first three, we have the EPA website, the USDA website, and the DOE Clean Cities website, where one can get additional information. But following that, here's my cursor again, I didn't already mention CalSTART. CalSTART has publications available that really that looked at anaerobic digesters from 2010 on back, and I've used some of that data in this presentation. Energy Vision, which recently has worked with putting out a Move On 2010 publication that was a workshop, a Clean Cities workshop held in Columbus, Ohio, that has a lot of information that you can get off of their website. And this last website here, BioCycle, is something that is very interesting. I was going, normally in these sessions you'll list several examples of successful operations, but if one would look at BioCycle, and it's a trade organization journal, it does cost $49 a year. One can, and if you can't, for various reasons, afford the $49 a year, you can sign up free of charge to the BioCycle Alert. But every month now you can read 3 or 4 different anaerobic digesters of different angles coming online. And so it's just growing so fast that it's just hard to track. And so rather than try to track it, I'll give a reference of where you need to go and can find a lot of this material. And especially in the September edition, it's a Renewable Energy Organics Recycling, where they talked about their 2010 conference, which was already held in Madison, Wisconsin, and Mary Ann attended that.
That was the 2011.
2011, I'm sorry. 2011 conference. In their September edition, they do have a listing of the people that presented and showed at the conference, the trade conference, and I saw in there the listing of a fair number of manufacturers and suppliers of the anaerobic digestion and cleanup system. So it's a good place to go, first off, if one wants to find, well, where can I buy a water wash system, or who has successfully showed a membrane system, and perhaps I can get some costing information from them. Another trade organization magazine, this one's free, however, is the MSW, Municipal Solid Waste Management Journal. And of course, they're more into landfills and composting, but again, that's a very close scenario. And as I already mentioned, Wikipedia is always a good place to get additional information. So with that, let me move on to vehicles and infrastructure barriers. That was kind of the question that we've already received. And here, if we look at the natural gas engines that are they're not unavailable in many truck sizes, we have this gap up here where R&D is underway. And so that's a program, a DOE, California Energy Commission, run out of National Energy Renewable Lab to try to fill this gap for some engines that are basically more than 11 liters, but between 11 and 15 liters in size. And the reason this is important is there is this dairy in Indiana, which the Fair Oaks Farms have just initiated recovering biomethane in their system, and they're using it to fuel their 42 milk hauling trucks. But these milk hauling trucks are fueled with, where I don't see it here, but it's up in here, the 8.9 liter Cummins Westport engine, which is a little undersized for a Class 8 truck. And what they did to get the additional range was to add a few more tanks, CNG tanks, and so it's a real question of whether the 8.9 liter engine can handle going over the highway in these Class 8 80,000 gross weight type of trucks. And so the other option is this Westport Innovations 15 liter GX, and that's just coming online as far as being available. However, since it is new, the price premium, I believe, is around $100,000 a truck now, which kind of puts it out of the range or ruins the budget if one wanted to go out and buy them. They are now on the road, and my initial hearing of the performance have been good. And so, however, they still are carrying a high price premium. However, the good news is because of all the new found shale gas, many OEMs, Ford and Navistar and GM and down the line in Chrysler, are beginning to offer trucks and vehicles either in conversion kits or dedicated vehicles, so that the vehicle offerings in the next several years will certainly, I don't want to say tenfold increase, but will certainly supply the demand. And again, this is really a offshoot of the fact that people now realize our abundance of natural gas, and so on one hand, they would say, well, you know, since natural gas is going to be $4 a million BTU, you're never going to be able to make renewable natural gas that cheap, and so it's never going to be used, and so why even consider it? And I prefer to look at it the other way, is because the conventional natural gas will be cheaper. We will have the vehicles and infrastructure that will solve a lot of the problems that we currently have with renewable natural gas. That, hey, we got the gas, we'd like to put it in the vehicles, but the vehicles aren't there. I do feel that the vehicles will be available in the much greater variety in the upcoming years. And so sometimes doing webinars actually helps the presenters as much as the audience. In this particular case, in the past, I've always followed conversion kits and/or. However, they never really have taken hold in the United States, because if one would convert an engine from gasoline or diesel to natural gas, you had to prove that the emissions were as low as met the EPA emission requirements of that year. So that is a very difficult task. However, now with the trucks coming out, with the diesel trucks coming out with cleanup systems of PM traps and selective catalytic reductive systems to meet the EPA 2010 tailpipe emission standards, you can convert those trucks to diesel. And also, EPA has kind of backed off the rules somewhat, that if you take an older truck and put on a conversion kit, that you only need to show that the conversion kit reduces emissions and not necessarily have to meet the current 2010 trucks. And so because of that, there are now some, I guess, dual fuel diesel engines, natural gas diesel engines available. And of course, this is important because to get fleets to convert to natural gas, they're not going to go out and buy, or they can't afford to convert all their fleet to 100% natural gas in 1 year. Typically, they might convert 10% of the fleet. And so what they would like to do is maybe buy 10% new dedicated trucks or cars, and then convert their existing fleets with conversion kits, which are less expensive. And so there are now 2 conversion kits that have been EPA certified, and another 2 conversion kits that are tests are underway. For information on this, I go to this website down here, razzleenterprise.com. And as I say, this is something that I dealt with Frank Davis 7, 8 years ago. We were doing a conversion kit for waste management trucks. It turned out that we took, like, I think it was 1992 Mack trucks and put a system on and had a dyno tested at West Virginia University, and it reduced significantly the NOx and the PM. However, it did not reduce the NOx low enough to meet in the 2005-2006 standard. And so although the vehicle was running cleaner, it wasn't running clean enough, and because of that, Waste Management pulled back a bit from converting to natural gas. And so it looks like that kind of hurdle has been removed, and so again, we'll be able to have more offerings of trucks, that perhaps dual fuel trucks, that will make renewable natural gas in more demand. All right. This is the Mary Ann slide. I'm going to go through it.
You want me to? I can talk if you want.
Okay, go ahead and talk then,
Okay.
Mary Ann.
Okay, basically, the chicken and the egg. The other side of it is the stations, and as of the middle of this past year, there were less than 1,000 natural gas stations in the U.S. and only 44 LNG stations, and only about half of them, less than half of them, were open to the public. And so that's been a real problem. And companies like Clean Energy are starting to really go after that problem. This past July, Clean Energy announced plans for what they call America's Natural Gas Highway, and they're planning to develop 150 LNG stations in conjunction with truck stops, the pilot Flying J travel centers, and they're planning to do that within the next 2 years. And they've acquired $300 million, $150 million from Chesapeake Energy, and another $150 million from 2 Asian investment funds as a first installment on that program. It will cost significantly more than $300 million, but that's a very large first installment. And they've started developing some of these stations. I believe there's one that's been completed. You can see it on that map on the bottom on Baytown, Texas. There are also various stages of engineering on some of the other stations. And if you look at the color coding, which one, the one that's complete, and then there's 6 under construction, 20 some odd are in various stages of permitting. So they are moving ahead on that. They're also involved in the Fair Oaks Dairy station, the station that's going in near the Fair Oaks Dairy that Jim talked about earlier. And that station, I believe, is supposed to start up by the end of this year. That is a CNG station, or CRNG. Also, I should mention that CNG stations, about 130 of them are being developed as part of the American Recovery Act funding. mostly CNG, but also LNG, and Clean Cities is involved in that process. Also, in the prior slide, Jim showed Chesapeake Energy is being involved with one of the converters. They're converting, I believe it's 800 vehicles were converted already, and they're planning to convert 4,200 total of their vehicles that are used in their shale gas exploration and development projects to natural gas, and they're putting in the stations to refuel them are also, they will be open to the public. And I believe Ancana is doing the same type of thing. As part of that, I believe 14 stations have been opened in Oklahoma by Chesapeake, and I forget which other, I think they're moving to Louisiana and opening a bunch of stations there in the coming year. And I should also mention here that Clean Energy, they're planning to retail a blend of 10%. Earlier I showed some figures for the greenhouse gas reductions of a 20% blend. They're actually planning to introduce a 10% blend. I have not seen a date yet. They have mentioned it in presentations, but they haven't made an official announcement. They're planning to sell it at a price premium of 10 cents per gallon gasoline equivalent over the price of fossil natural gas at their stations. And I guess we can move on to the next one.
We're at our conclusions.
Yes. These are pretty much self-explanatory, although Jim has something to say on one of them. Basically, natural gas production will grow, which, as I said earlier, will suppress price increases and volatility in the market. Most of the natural gas will be used for power generation, but we fully expect it to make inroads into transportation, especially as a heavy-duty vehicle fuel. And that's as the fueling infrastructure and the vehicle offerings expand. And as we said, we see that happening, and we expect that to continue to happen. Improved energy security and balance of trade are the main benefits of increased reliance on natural gas. And without renewable natural gas, increased use of natural gas will have very small greenhouse gas benefit. I really did not discuss that in great detail, but the EPA has increased their estimates of how much methane is emitted in the process of producing a natural gas, either from shale gas or from conventional wells. And as a result, the benefit of natural gas as compared with petroleum diesel or gasoline is less than what we've been seeing, what we've been talking about in the past, which provides even more of a need for renewable gas. And although dependent on the specifics of each installation, renewable gas can reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 80% or more. Sometimes it's almost 100%. And then Jim, do you want to take over?
Oh, well, Mary Ann, this is her slide, and she had renewable natural gas needs significant cost reduction or other incentives to compete with the fossil natural gas. And I was thinking significant was a little strong. It does need cost reduction. I think a good renewable natural gas system, well thought out, planned, and engineered, could produce renewable natural gas from $5 to $8 a million a BTU. And although that's higher than fossil natural gas, it's not that much higher. To me, significant cost reduction would be what we would need in photovoltaics to reduce the cells, or in fuel cell technology to reduce the cost of fuel cells, or batteries. They all need significant cost reduction. Renewable natural gas is close to fossil natural gas, and using some of its attributes, being green and sustainable, I think it can compete with fossil natural gas. And as we've seen, because of the abundance now of fossil natural gas, it's going to develop the vehicles in infrastructure for renewable natural gas. So I'm optimistic about our chances. And I'll do the last slide here, which again, government incentives. We can always use government incentives, and part of that was the reason for the study to to show that, yes, there is a lot of renewable natural gas, maybe just under 5 trillion cubic feet available, so that the government would be interested in putting some type of incentive that we could be included with the fossils and the oil and other energy technologies that are available. With that, I think we're on a questions or comments.
Thank you, Marianne. Thank you, Jim. This has been very, very educational. I appreciate you sharing your experience and insights with the audience today. We do have some really good questions that have come through from audience members. If anybody has a question, you're invited to send that question to us in the question box on your control panel. And if we can't get to all of them in the time we have remaining, we'll do our best to answer those and send them out in a follow-up email to everyone. But first question, in the work that I've been doing with Western Washington Clean Cities, of course, there are a number of sources of biogas that you could turn into biomethane. And one of the important ones is wastewater treatment plants. And the question came in, is there any significant difference between maybe either the greenhouse gas differences or any of the technologies used to clean up the gas between a wastewater treatment plant biogas versus gas from landfills or from animal livestock facilities?
Well, I can answer the cleanup portion, and Marianne might do the greenhouse gas portion. And the wastewater treatment plants are basically about 2% solids. And so they're obviously 98% water, and so that they're somewhat different than the municipal solid waste, and you kind of want a 40% version. And so there is some benefit in doing a cold digestion. However, the problem associated with wastewater is you don't know what's getting flushed down the toilet, not just use the toilet, or sewage system. And so you will get lipstick and other cosmetics which have silicon in it, which means you're going to get siloxanes that you'll have to put an additional cleanup train or cleanup treatment for the siloxanes. Now, the good news is siloxanes have been removed successfully in almost all cases, so there is a little additional cost associated with wastewater treatment. And also, in wastewater treatment, there's oils and fats and some scum that sometimes occurs on the surface of wastewater. If they can be skimmed, they're actually a high-strength, what we call a high-strength source of methane. And so, if that can be, I know in the East, you have to pay a significant amount of money to dispose of that. And here, if you would use an anaerobic digester to digest it, you'd get a high source of methane and also a significant tipping fee to accept that. And so I'm talking so much I kind of lost the question, but I think it's the value of wastewater treatment and going with cold digestion.
Okay. One thing I could mention is we have not done wastewater treatment yet in the GREET model. It's on our plate for this new fiscal year. It is a bit different, as Jim said, from the anaerobic digestion pathways that we've looked at. We're talking larger scale for the most part. Lot of co-digestion goes on in wastewater treatment plants, which increases can increase their energy yield. You have loads of food waste and various other industrial waste that are combined in the stream, in the input stream. And so it's a little bit of a different animal. There's also a lot more combined heat and power that makes more sense at that scale. The digesters often need a lot of heat, particularly in the winter months. So it's a little bit different, but we will be looking at it, and I'm sorry I can't give you any numbers because we have not examined it yet.
We've had several questions about different kinds of incentives. One having to do with the idea of carbon market, carbon taxes, what's the value of carbon in the marketplace, how does that relate, and then questions related to incentives for either natural gas in particular. One audience member said the Natural Gas Act that's been proposed is stalled. So what are these different incentives, Jim, that you were talking about?
Well, I usually avoid those like the plague because they always are changing and adjusting. And as as the person indicated, the Natural Gas Act looks like it's stalled and will not, well, who knows whether it's going to be passed. So my rule of thumb, at least on incentives, is try to make a business case without incentives. And then if that's doable, then incentives are the icing on the cake. And I would go to my local Clean Cities coordinator as far as they're fairly knowledgeable about the available incentives on vehicles and local and regional incentives. I've seen also a lot of state and regional type of incentives, and so it's and I'll go back to what I said before: is try to make a business case without incentives, and then see what incentives can also buy down at least the initial cost. What you don't want to do is go with an incentive for the out years, because what government give us, they take it away, and that certainly happened in the electrical power industry, where there were feed-in tariffs that the utility had to buy the electricity at $10 a kilowatt hour, and then when that went away, your business went away, and so again, use incentives for first cost, capital equipment cost, and try to vehicle cost, infrastructure cost, and try to have a business model without incentives would be my recommendation.
I would second that. I think that there's just too much uncertainty right now in terms of what's going to be available, what's going to be there in a couple of years, or even 5 years, or even a couple of years. And making the business case without the incentives is much preferable to relying on them and then having them disappear. The low carbon fuel standard is another one that I have to confess I'm not as up to date as I would like to be. My understanding is that the market has started operating, but I don't know what those credits are trading at. I do know that landfill gas coming from the Texas area, from the McComas Bluff landfill, is coming into the California market. I believe that's being sold to Sacramento Municipal Utility District. I know that there are a couple of large landfill projects in California that are eligible. But there is some controversy right now in terms of how things get counted, and it's becoming very complicated. So I think that it's one that's worth watching. But again, I would not base a project on having those incentives available.
We got a quick technical question. When you separate the carbon dioxide from the methane, is there potential value in that carbon dioxide? Do you know of any, maybe some North American technologies for using that CO2 in greenhouses or for other uses?
Well, obviously greenhouses, and there are some greenhouses associated with landfill. But on the other hand, you realize that you can't sell it to Pepsi or Coke and then have one or the other say where they got their CO2 from, even though on GC it's purer than the carbon dioxide that they do buy. However, some markets for carbon dioxide, there is still a market for dry ice in certain areas, and as a dry cleaning fluid. So you can market the carbon dioxide somewhat, and it would be something to look into.
Another market that is real viable for CO2 is injection for enhanced recovery. But the problem is enhanced recovery in oil wells or gas wells.
Yeah.
The problem is that those wells tend not to be where you have the CO2 available, and it's simply not economic to transport it. So yes, you could use it for that, but you'd have to build a pipeline, and that would cost a lot of money, and then it becomes less economic at that point.
Marianne, we have a specific question related to the GREET model. Where did the 3-mile haul distance for animal waste come from, and does this correlate with the bigger is better concept?
Well, it's just a default assumption. The user can use whatever they want. You can put in 2 miles, you can put in 1 mile, you can put in no hauling. It's basically an average. Yes, a lot of these digesters are getting manures from several locations. Like, for example, at Fair Oaks Dairy in Indiana, it's Fair Oaks Dairies. It's multiple dairies. And the manure is being trucked from several barns. 3 miles is a reasonable number. It's neither high nor low. But like I said, it's just an assumption. Is there another part to that?
Someone's just responded that the default maybe came from the USDA inference regarding on-site or close to on-site production?
It's possible. I have to go back and look at our report to see what we actually said about it. There is a document that right now is in editing, and it will be available on the GREET website, which is on that slide that I showed earlier. The document titled is Waste Wheel Analysis of Anaerobic Digestion-Based Renewable Natural Gas Pathways with the GREET model. And that explains in great detail what we've assumed in these new pathways. And the 3 miles may be discussed in more detail in there. I don't recall. That report should be coming out very shortly.
Good. We've got time maybe for another. What's the relationship between the cubic feet of gas production and sort of the gasoline gallon equivalents or diesel gallon equivalents in terms of cost? Or if you had a certain flow of gas per minute, say 200 cubic feet per minute of gas, how many gasoline gallon equivalents would you expect to get for that kind of flow?
All right. Well, I use the value which is closest. 1 cubic foot is 1,000 BTU, and so a gallon of gasoline that's even getting a little tough. It's about 124,000 BTU. It changes somewhat in the fact that if you add the ethanol in it, it lowers the value somewhat. So you could maybe say a gallon gasoline equivalent is 120,000 BTUs, and 1 cubic foot of renewable natural gas is 1,000 BTUs.
Yeah, I think in GREET we assume something like 116,000 or something like that. Yes, that's consistent.
Well, again, we've kind of reached the time limit for our webinar today. To all the attendees, if you've asked a question, we're going to post questions and get an email out to everyone. We'll answer as much as possible the questions you've asked today. Marianne and Jim, I want to thank you again for sharing your time and your experience today. Any closing remarks from either of you?
No, but thank you very much for taking the time and not doing your Christmas shopping online today. And
hey, it may have been happening. We don't know.
This was a pleasure. Thank you.
I only have one closing remark, and it's kind of my soapbox remark, is that it just makes sense to me that the renewable natural gas should be a local, bottoms-up activity that would keep the dollars as far as economic development within the community rather than send them abroad. And that's an energy security type argument, but it's at the very local level, and that's what makes sense to me.
I think that's a great point, Jim. That's something we've been finding out here in Washington State, is that this is local fuel that we can spend the money on here rather than sending our money not just abroad but across the country. We can really use those dollars here in our state.
You don't want to Texas.
Actually,
thank you all. Okay, go ahead.
Comment. Actually, I should have mentioned this earlier. In the back of the presentation, there are a series of slides that we did not discuss today in the interest of time. And they basically summarize the Clean Cities activities in the area of renewable natural gas and what's in their strategic plan, and then recent initiatives. And one of those recent initiatives, which basically dovetails with what you just said, Jim, is that we are in the process of developing a tool to estimate state, regional, and national impacts of natural gas projects, basically jobs. And hopefully that tool will be available at the end of the fiscal year. And that would include both renewable natural gas projects and conventional natural gas projects, because that is a very important area.
That's terrific. And if you're okay with providing, maybe we'll have those slides as a separate piece and can add that to the website with all the other materials that we're developing for our Washington State project. Thank you to all the attendees who have stuck with us today. Just as a reminder, the second part of this webinar series will be on tomorrow at the same time. And if you haven't yet registered, there's still time to go to the website link and register for that webinar tomorrow. Thank you all very much. This has been terrific. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.